Good evening, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Talking Point. My name is Fahraaz Patel. Of course, this Wednesday we are giving you an extended version of the show. We say Jazakallah for staying with us here at Hilaal TV channel 347 on DSTV. As the country waits for President Cyril Ramaphosa to select his cabinet, it has been 4 weeks since that general election took place. 4 weeks where so much has changed within the political landscape of this country. Many of you at home have seen a leaked letter that was of course written to the ANC from the DA with regards to cabinet posts that they would want. The ANC has said that they will not be tainted by it, but as we stand right now, many are still waiting in bated breath where the future of the country is going to be going. Today, I'd like to welcome Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki, who is the chairperson of the South African Institute of International Affairs. We're going to be discussing on various topics with regards to this government of national unity, what's going to happen with regards to cabinet posts, and the future of South Africa. Mr. Mbeki, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here on Talking Point on Hilaal TV.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. Mr. Mbeki, prior to May the 29th, if I told you that the ANC would be dropping over 15% from what happened in 2019, would you have believed me at 40.18%?
No, I definitely wouldn't have believed you. I thought the ANC was going to go below 50, maybe up to 45, maybe 47, 45. But I never expected it would go as low as 40%. That's a 17% drop from the election before. You remember the election before it was 57, and it has dropped. So that was really unimaginable. But of course, we should have listened to the opinion polls because there were a number of them that did say the ANC was going to go down to 40.
They brought in a lot of the the veterans, Thabo Mbeki, Toki Sekwale, Kgalema Motlanthe, and the idea was to try and still tell the public that, okay, we may still be this liberation movement, but we can still speak to you as the person on the street. Did that backfire on them, or was it just sort of like it's something that we do on electioneering and we hope for the best? What is it that the ANC did prior to May the 29th that may have dropped them with regards to this 40.18? I'm not talking about, obviously, the socio-economic problems that are in this country, but from an electioneering perspective, did they just take a step wrong with regards to that?
Well, I think bringing retired presidents, what the ANC thought was that these were the guys who were the leaders of the ANC when the ANC got 70% of the vote in 2004. They were in the 60s when these people were leaders of the ANC. So the ANC thought, well, the public will associate them with success. So it brought those. But what the strategists of the ANC didn't look at was that it was sending a message to the voters that we have failed, we the present leadership. We have to go to the old leadership. So in a way, it was an admission of failure. So I think it actually backfired, as you say, because the public said, if you have to bring people who were last in power many years ago to come and campaign for you, it means that you yourself, the present leaders, are not credible enough with the voters.
The MK party starts in December of last year. Everyone's looking at them, they're thinking, okay, the charisma, the charm of former President Jacob Zuma would be able to do something, but not to be the third largest political party in the country, 14.58%. It's very difficult to see a party, bar, of course, the ANC in 1994, and of course, circumstances were different there, that they could come in and garner over 4.5 million votes. Did it take you by surprise, Mr.
Oh,
Mbeki?
took me totally by surprise. First, the fact that it happened, I thought the splitting of the ANC had come to an end, so to speak. But I didn't realize that a former president would now split away from the ANC. I hadn't thought about that side of it.
Yep.
But having said that, Zuma was a popular, he's a popular person anyway. He's popular with the masses. So still, I think it's almost like a miracle for him to have gotten the following, the voters that he got in such a short period of time.
And what's surprising about this is that the perception was that many of his votes would come from the KwaZulu-Natal rural areas, maybe Mpumalanga also. But a lot of it came through Northwest.
Yeah.
That was shocking. I mean, a predominantly ANC stronghold, maybe some would say an EFF stronghold. But the fact that he was able to get there, where I come from, Ekurhuleni, in various taxi ranks, there was a bigger support for the MK party rather than their rival within KwaZulu-Natal, the IFP. So that just shows that the MK party was not able to appeal to the rural constituency, but also many within the urban constituency that were seeing this party as really the alternative to either the IFP or the ANC.
Yes, I think the popularity of the MK party, in a way, is telling us how dissatisfied the people of South Africa have become with the ANC. So we shouldn't really be surprised. The ANC's policies have not been favoring the great majority of South African citizens. They started off promising that they would do. You remember their famous slogan, bringing a good life for all.
A better life for all.
A better life for all. And it was a good slogan. But then if you have a good slogan, you have to deliver on it. But what did the ANC deliver on? Gradually over the years, it delivered less and less to the large number of people and more to the African middle class. So it was this African middle class, especially in the public sector, who started to more and more benefit, and the great number of former ANC voters felt that the ANC was no longer working for them. So when you have a charismatic leader like Jacob Zuma articulating his own dissatisfaction with the performance of the ANC government, then it just spreads like wildfire.
The Moonshot Pact, this was seen to be some sort of a great alternative. The DA was selling this doomsday coalition, only they can rescue South Africa. But this Moonshot Pact really fell flat on its face because the DA, of course, immediately when the results came out, it was quite clear that they weren't going to be part of it. I was there at the IEC. Herman Mashaba was quite upset. The IFB said, look, we're considering also moving away. The Freedom Front Plus was at the same sort of juncture at that moment. These sort of center / close to the right, does it still have an appeal with many within South Africa, especially when you look at parties who propose, have this sort of neoliberal approach to things in this country?
Well, if we start with the DA itself, I was reading an analysis of who votes for the DA. The DA, according to this study, 58% of DA voters are white South Africans. And then they're followed by the colored South Africans, and then by the Africans. But the white population of South Africa is shrinking. It's not growing. So anyone who thinks the DA is a party of the future, which depends on 58% for its white vote, it depends on the white voter, then doesn't understand what is happening in the country. So the DA is not a party of the future. It's a declining party because its base, its voter base is shrinking. So that is one of the problems that, so when parties, and then the other members of the parties like the IFP have strong competitor. The ANC is a strong competitor of the DA, but now the MK party is a strong, and so is the EFF a strong competitor. So this moonshot peg was actually, it was a dream, let me put it that way, but it wasn't premised on serious strategic thinking and serious analysis of the situation, the political situation on the ground.
But what's definitely not a dream is the government of national unity. For that dream to be fulfilled, the question is, will these 10 parties, including the ANC, find a sense of common ground? After the break, I continue my conversation with Moeletsi Mbeki, where we speak about the elements that make up the government of national unity. Welcome back to Talking Point. Well, over the weekend, 10 parties had been announced as the parties that would be joining the ANC as part of this Government of National Unity, Grand Coalition, whatever you as the viewer feel is the right term to describe this. Mr. Mbeki, what is the right term to describe this? GNU or a Grand Coalition?
Well, I'm quite happy with the Government of National Unity.
Yes.
It's an aspiration to unify the political parties. So I can live with that. Of course, it is more like a grand coalition in real terms, but I can live with Government of National Unity.
Well, let's cast our back to 1994. When then Government National Unity was there, it was more of to foster nation building, to foster goodwill, to foster this rainbow nation. It's 1994, democracy kicks in. 30 years later, obviously, things are much different. You've got an unemployment rate that is close to 32%. You've got high crime. You've got SOEs that are just not performing at its best level. The difference then to now, it's really quite stark, isn't it? So do you still feel that citizens look at this word Government of National Unity and are convinced by it, given now that there are 10 parties and these 10 parties really do have supposed opposing views to each other?
I think that there is a marketing job that the members of the Government of National Unity still have to do. They haven't marketed it yet. They've just called it that. They have to convince us, and they have to convince the voters in particular as to what's different about the Government of National Unity from an ordinary government of South Africa.
I'm looking at this GNU and I'm looking at each of these parties, and obviously can they be workable, relatable? In the next segment, I'm going to touch on cabinet posts, but let's take, for example, NHI, right? Amongst the 10 parties, it seems like the ANC is headstrong on wanting to keep NHI, whereas the DA is saying, well, it's not a workable system. The other 8 political parties are really on the middle ground. You know, some are saying, look, possibility, yes, but the healthcare system needs to be fixed. That's just one part of it. They've also opposing views with regards to how SOE should be obviously operated. Is there a sort of consensus that these parties can come through? Because their manifestos, when you listen to it prior to the elections, really have stark differences to each other.
Yeah, they have differences, but also they are more center parties, really. We don't have a right-wing party in South Africa, and we don't have a left-wing party. If you look at the French elections that are happening now, you have strong left-wing parties, you have strong right-wing parties, you have strong centrist parties. Our politics are more at the center at this moment in time. So although there are lots of disputes about the how, but there is agreement amongst all the parties that everybody in South Africa should have access to good health care. So there is an agreement about the objective. It's how you get there that we don't agree on as of now. Others say medical aid must stay. Others say there must be this national health insurance and then a lot in between, a lot of ideas. But they agree on the main objective. So in real terms, the government of national unity is actually feasible because we don't have much ideological differences amongst our political parties. I would never expect a government of national unity in France.
Yeah,
because
that would be impossible, yes. Yeah.
I wouldn't expect it. So, but in South Africa, I think it's doable. There has to be a lot of discussion. There have to be a lot of patience, a lot of tolerance, and getting over the big egos of some of our politicians. But I think it's doable because there isn't a big ideological gap between our existing parties. In the future, of course, the things may change.
You speak of feasibility, and of course, this looks great on paper, but of course, there has to be deliverance to the people. One of that's obviously going to be economic growth. The GDP shrunk 0.1% in that first quarter. That's, of course, one of the biggest discussion points with regards to how can the economy grow. There's also, at the center of this, trying to fight crime. There's also how does South Africa get out of the malaise that it has with regards to state-owned entities. For it to take shape, how does the 7th administration, with this government of national unity, really take it to a level in which South Africans can say, from now up until maybe the end of this year, there is some progress, something which the citizens can say, hey, we're moving in some sort of perfect direction?
Well, you see, I think the wrong policies, in my view, that our government has been pursuing is they have a consumption-driven economic policy. And all the other parties have gone along with it. We should actually have a production and investment-driven economic policy. If you look at the countries in Asia don't have the levels of unemployment we have. Countries like Malaysia, like Bangladesh, China, India, why? They have investment-driven policies. The South African government's policies are consumption-driven policies. So we don't invest. For example, today, only 14% of our gross domestic product goes to investment. In India, it's 31% of GDP goes to investment. The result is the economy is humming and everybody is employed, people are busy. In South Africa, our population is standing on street corners and not employed. Why? Because there's no investment. And why is there no investment? Is this consumption-driven policies of the South African government, of the ANC government. And in the discussion over the general elections, in the debate, I haven't seen anyone addressing the issue of investment-driven economic policies. So the existing political parties, at the end of the day, don't have policies that will grow the South African economy.
One of those policies, and I know it's something that you've spoken a lot, is Black economic empowerment. Now, the question that needs to be asked is it still a feasible policy, or has it been poorly mismanaged by the ruling party over the last 3 decades?
Well, for me, the problem with Black economic empowerment is that it disincentivizes people from becoming entrepreneurs. That is the real heart of the problem. That is one side of it. Secondly, it divides the people of South Africa. Instead of unifying them, it divides them by preferring Black Africans against Indian Africans, against white Africans. So those are the two fundamental problems. Instead of uniting the people of South Africa, it divides the people of South Africa. That's point number. And then point number two, it doesn't give us entrepreneurs, because instead of becoming an entrepreneur, setting up your own business, starting a business, employing 2 or 3 or 4 people, you're just receiving shares from an existing company, and so you are a passive person. And that's one of the reasons we have such high unemployment, is because we don't have new entrepreneurs. And people who should be entrepreneurs and building new companies and starting new companies and providing jobs for are receiving.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Mr. Mbeki. Is it that ANC's cadre deployment has been the biggest stumbling block with regards to this?
It's not the big, it's one of the stumbling blocks. You see, the ANC's cadre deployment is part of the consumption-driven mindset of the ANC, that we have to consume, that its people, its members, they succeed by consuming. It doesn't think they succeed by producing. If you produce, you have to save, you have to tighten your belt, you have to build. The ANC is saying you must consume. That's its definition of success, is consuming. It's not producing.
How do we address that legacy of
Well,
lack of economic? Because I want to bring
but
this.
the public has already addressed it. They've rejected the ANC. You see,
But how do we go back and say, okay, like for example, yourself as a Black African, you would know best because you experienced apartheid. I'm a legacy of what had happened because my parents and my grandparents were victims of not being a part of the economy in prior to 1994. So how do we say, okay, let's create a tangible system where taking away the deployment, taking away stuff where it's just strictly for one specific group, where every previously disadvantaged, even our white compatriots, can be part of this economy of South Africa. How do we do that?
By promoting entrepreneurship, so that the government has an institution like the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC. IDC should be providing capital to all entrepreneurs. Whether you're white or black or Indian or colored, they should be, if you have a good idea that is going to produce a success, that has a good probability of producing a successful company, which creates jobs, which adds value to the economy, they should give you the capital and not say, oh, are you black, are you white, are you this, that, and the other. That's what's wrong with the policies of this government. Now, the voters now realize, ironically, the Black African voters realize the ANC is not adding value to their country. And they are the ones who are now stopping to vote for it.
After the break, the cabinet announcement. Everyone's waiting with bated breath. There's demands from the Democratic Alliance. Will the ANC succumb to those demands, or will they say, well, we still have 40.18%, so we're making the calls? And the president, of course, from a constitutional prerogative, has that to his advantage. After the break, we talk about that. Welcome back to Talking Point. Now, if anyone saw that leaked letter from the DA's federal chairperson Helen Zille to ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula, it had mentioned that the Democratic Alliance wants 11 cabinet posts. They also want a potential of the deputy president to be that of its leader, John Steenhuisen. Mr. Mbeki, when I read the letter, when I was actually trying to mimic what Helen Zille would be saying, has the ANC allowed the DA too much in this Government of National Unity negotiations?
Well, I assumed that was a negotiating gambit by the DA. But on the other hand, it has a lot of negative elements in it because remember, according to the Constitution, the cabinet is appointed by the president. Only the president can appoint the cabinet. Not the DA, not the EFF, not anyone else, according to the Constitution of South Africa. Now, to write a public letter during negotiations and say, I want position X, Y, Z, you are actually undermining the authority of the president. So the DA says they want rule of law, but they are undermining precisely the person who is in charge of ensuring there is rule of law in South Africa, which is the president who has to make sure there's rule of law in the country. So there's some negatives about how the DA is conducting its negotiations. That's point number one. Point number two, on the other hand, it shows the DA doesn't know how the national government operates. It's sad to say that the second largest party doesn't understand. The government of South Africa is primarily driven by the civil service, not by the politicians. So the DA can have 12 ministers, can have 50% of the cabinet, but the civil service is the ANC civil service.
And the DA doesn't have a really great repertoire with civil service itself. I mean, you look at COSATU, for example. I mean, they already, at this very moment, having a sort of a tit-for-tat with COSATU, and that's not good news.
So it shows lack of understanding that it's not ministerial positions that matter. It's everything else that... we have no government in South Africa today, technically. But I drove here, I bought petrol, and I drove here. Yes. I had egg and bacon this morning for my breakfast. So the country is running. So the DA has got a very exaggerated sense of what part the politicians play in the life of the country. Yes, they play a role, but there are many other players that make South Africa work. So obsessing about positions, I will have 11 positions, 12 positions in the cabinet, shows that they don't understand how South Africa works. So there are many players who make South Africa work. The private sector makes South Africa work. The civil service makes South Africa work. The academics make South Africa. So there are many players obsessing about cabinet positions, shows that they really don't understand how this country works, which is sad for me to say, because they're a big institution in this country. They are a big political institution. They should be providing leadership instead of us having to educate them about how the country works.
And that brings to the next question, because prior to the elections, they had this controversy of the burning flag. They then spoke about doomsday coalitions with the ANC, EFF, and the MK. And now all of a sudden, when you look at that letter, it's sort of like hey, we want these positions, otherwise we're pulling out. And if we pull out, well, then your government of national unity is collapsing. I mean, that's a dangerous precedent, isn't it? That a party like the DA, and I'm going to bring up their percentage, 21.81%. So they're not in a position right now to say, well, we've got 50 plus, so we can make the decision. That really is a bit of an issue if you're a South African looking at the DA saying, hey, you're not really in a position right now to be dictating such terms.
No, the DA is in no position to, according to their own calculation, if it pulled out of the government of national unity, the existing parties have 200 members, which is 50% of parliament. So it wouldn't collapse the government of national unity if the DA pulled out. They think they've got everybody over the barrel, but actually they don't. Because as long as the other 9 remain working together, the country will proceed and new laws will be passed because they have 50%. And the others who are not, the DA doesn't have 50% to stop laws being passed. The others like MK, EFF, Action SA, Musa, they will vote with the national with the government of national unity to pass laws. So that's why I'm saying that, to me, it's disappointing that the DA doesn't seem to understand that the limits of its powers. It has limited power. With 21%, well, it's 21%.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Mbeki, there's obviously key portfolios within this cabinet that are going to be having a magnifying glass. I mean, one of them has to be, of course, Treasury. The other part of the economics cluster is trade and industry. When you look at the security cluster, police and defense. Obviously, the former defense minister, not the predecessor to Tandi Modise, Masiviwe Mapisa Kakula, she was involved in, of course, corruption allegations there. And then obviously she went on to become the Speaker of Parliament. But I'm looking at those portfolios, and this is not discrediting the other portfolios because I'm sure that they are equally important. How important is President Ramaphosa's selection of these portfolios really going to drive this country for the next 5 years, given its in real importance?
Well, the president of South Africa, which is President Ramaphosa, he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of South Africa. So the security forces of South Africa are under the command, are directly commanded by the commander-in-chief. So he can't give over that constitutional responsibility to anyone else. Even anyone else in the ANC cannot become commander-in-chief. He has to be commander-in-chief. So the notion that the DA will control the police, will control defense, is taking us back that there is no understanding of the reality of the constitution of South Africa. The question of the treasury, the taxpayer, I pay my taxes to the government of South Africa, and the chief executive is liable for ensuring that the money I pay is used for what it is supposed to be used for. The chief executive of the country, which is the president of the country. So to take somebody else to make him finance minister, if the president doesn't agree, just because you have leverage over his party, again, is not understanding how the situation is working, how our society works.
Understanding the Constitution, I would like to think that all of these 9 parties that have joined the ANC have an understanding of the Constitution, because you've put it eloquently there that when it comes to President Ramaphosa, he's the commander-in-chief. When it comes to the Constitution, he has the prerogative. But do these parties understand it? Because one would understand that a lot of them, on paper and on verbally, they're saying, well, we're joining the government of national unity, not on post. But of course, secretly, there could be this potential that, look, we're in it for a reason. How important is it that they understand the Constitution when joining this government of national unity, especially when it comes to cabinet posts?
It's very important. First, they went to the voters and said, we know the Constitution of South Africa. We support, we uphold the Constitution. Then when they start talking like they're doing now, when they start negotiating, we realize that some of them actually don't understand the Constitution and some of the big parties don't understand the Constitution of South Africa. For example, the DA is saying that President Ramaphosa must fire directors general so that their 11 ministers or 12 ministers can appoint their own DA directors general. Now, a director general is an employee of the state of South Africa. He's not an employee of the ANC. Now, it shows again we have this huge opposition party. It doesn't understand really the constitution of the country. Because if it thinks President Ramaphosa can fire the Director General, it's not his employee. He's the employee of the state of South Africa. There are contracts, there are rights. A Director General has rights under the Constitution of South Africa. You can't just remove them just because there's a new minister. You can remove a minister any day. The president can remove a minister any day. But you can't remove a Director General who's an employee of the state because he has a contract or she has a contract.
Well, speaking of the chief executive of the country, President Ramaphosa, he's been given another chance to lead South Africa for the 7th administration. The question is, have he and his party, the ANC, learned any of their lessons from the big dramatic drop that they've had in this year's elections? Do stay tuned to talk. Welcome back to Talking Point. Now, as mentioned earlier on, of course, the ANC dropped to 40.18%. Some would say the reading was on the wall ahead of prior to that local government elections in 2021, maybe even back to 2016 local government election where it lost some very key metros in South Africa. Mr. Mbeki, when we had you last year on Talking Point, you said that decisiveness is not really a great quality of President Ramaphosa. Is the 7th administration going to change that? Is the leopard going to change its stripes with 9 parties forming this GNU?
Well, I think one of the things that I have learned since our last interview is the point which I was making about the DA. The government is only one of the institutions that runs South Africa. There are many other institutions that make South Africa run. So, if we have a government that is not very effective, there are other institutions that make up for it. And look at what is happening now with our railway infrastructure, for example. The railways collapsed in the hands of the government company, which is Transnet. But we were still exporting coal because the entrepreneurs in the business sector, they went and bought trucks and trucked the coal. That's not the optimal way to do it, but the country didn't die. The country kept operating because they bought trucks and they shipped the coal out for export using trucks. They shipped the manganese out, they shipped the granite out. So we shouldn't be too alarmed about an ineffective government or a slow government, because there are other institutions in our country that are actually working, that are making the country work. So I'm not too worried about whether the 7th administration will be get up and go or dragging its feet. There are other players in our society who are dynamic, who are energetic, who want to make the country work, and who are making lots of effort to make the country work.
There was always this discussion of a quote-unquote failed state, but I mean, you've just answered it right there. Everything's still functioning in this country. I mean, Eskom, what are we now, close to 3 months without no load shedding? You've got to, and you mentioned Transnet still effective. Okay, Denel may not be making as much weapons as it was making before. You've still got Prasa, that the trains are working in some parts of the country. You've still got civil service functioning. You've still got water. Okay, not really. I mean, I know you were telling me off air that in Randburg you still don't have water, but there's still some parts of South Africa that do have water, especially in Gauteng where Rand Water is doing its maintenance. So how much of PR or how much of education do the citizens need to understand that South Africa is not in this deep, dark alley as opposed to maybe when we look at the rest of Africa where nothing is actually functioning. I want to talk about just yesterday in Kenya, when, of course, when you looked at what happened at Parliament, we don't have that at this moment. And there's a sense of gratitude that I think us as South Africans need to have, even if it is very little.
Yes, but it's the South African citizens who are making the country work. So we have a dynamic population. We have been having wrong economic policies by the present government or the outgoing government, which has created lots of problems of unemployment and so on. But at the same time, we have a dynamic population that tries its best to keep people employed, to keep the country fed, to export out of the country so that we can buy from other countries. So I don't think we're facing a crisis or there are lots of people who are predicting that South Africa is a failed state and so on. I don't think we are there. I can't say what will happen in the future, but in the here and now, we are not there.
Mr. Mbeki, let's touch on the African National Congress. Of course, I've mentioned that the drop that they've had. There's always this discussion on renewal, and renewal has been the big thing that they've been talking about. If you look to 2029, and maybe let's look maybe closer to that, to 2026 with the local government elections, is it still a party that can speak to the citizen of this country, especially the youth, who are really taking their vote elsewhere?
Yeah. This is a real challenge for the ANC. You know, liberation parties, we've had many liberation parties, not just in South Africa, but in Asia, because there were colonialists there as well. And many liberation parties in South Africa have collapsed. They started losing the support of the population, and in the end, they disappeared. If you look at President Kaunda's party, UNIP in Zambia, it was a very powerful party, a very big supporter of South Africa's struggle against apartheid. I don't think it has a single member of parliament left today. So this is the risk that the ANC, I hope its leaders are looking at it and asking themselves, if Kaunda's party can disappear, if Kenyatta's party can disappear, if Nkrumah's party can disappear, why can't the ANC disappear? And what should they do if they wanted to continue? What should they be doing to stop it from disappearing? And that's the question they have to ask themselves. But the ANC can disappear. I mean, look at the Indian Congress Party of India. That's a very powerful party. The party of Gandhi, the party of Nehru, the party of Mrs. Gandhi. Where is it today? Okay, it's in the opposition benches, but the BJP has walked all over it. So there's nothing God-given about the ANC that it has to survive. It will only survive if it delivers what the people of South Africa want delivered. If it doesn't, it will disappear.
I look at the National Assembly sitting. Obviously, the opposition, as we speak, and this is clearly on semantics and numbers, would be the MK party. And they obviously would oppose anything when it comes to President Ramaphosa. But one thing that they probably want to bring to the speaker's attention, and the EFF brought it 2 weeks ago, was Phala Phala. Given who is in the government of national unity, because I had a conversation with Peter Groenewald during the elections, and he said, if there an opportunity came for there to be an impeachment vote on Ramaphosa with regards to Phala Phala, they would bring it. They're part of the GNU. The DA is part of the GNU. No one really knows what's going to happen there as we speak at this moment. But is Phala Phala still something that's going to come and haunt Ramaphosa in the near future?
Well, the answer is I don't know, because there was a recommendation that there should be an investigation, and the ANC in Parliament used its majority to overrule that investigation. So we don't know. I don't know whether there was wrongdoing in Pala Pala or there was no wrongdoing. Because the investigation was killed by the ANC and by the public protector.
One final question, Mr. Mbeki. You've seen the dawn of democracy. You've seen the ANC's power been obviously enhanced and, of course, dropped as we speak this year. And this is the beauty of democracy. We've seen new political parties come into the space. When we look 30 years on, how has South Africa's democracy really taken new heights? There have been challenges, but there have been great gains also within the country. Talk to us about that. And as a South African, can we still be really proud of a democracy that is functioning despite everything that's going on around us?
Well, if we compare ourselves to our neighbor in Zimbabwe, when they have elections, people get killed in Zimbabwe. Nobody gets killed when there are elections in South Africa. The ANC lost its majority. It's been in power for 30 years. It lost its majority. The president went on TV and said, we've lost the majority. What should we do? He went and talked to other political parties, and they sat together and said, okay, let's try this thing called government of national unity. Nobody got killed. There is no army on the streets saying that you have to follow Cyril Ramaphosa. He was elected by parliament. They could have unelected him if they so wish. In fact, I think there was a candidate, yes, but
Julius Malema
stood against him.
Yes,
Julius Malema is a free man. There's nobody who has gone to his to harass him at his house. So I think the democracy of South Africa was created by the people of South Africa. It was the people of South Africa through the United Democratic Front, the churches, the ANC, the PAC, AZAPO, and all those who created the democratic culture of South Africa. So it's part of our culture. And no one political party can destroy it.
Mr. Mbeki, thank you so much for joining us here on Talking About. Much appreciated for joining us here.
Thank you.
That's Moeletsi Mbeki, Chairperson of the South African Institute of International Affairs, sharing his wisdom with regards to the Government of National Unity, looking ahead to the 7th administration. And we as South Africans still wait for that cabinet announcement to be made, to usher in a new era here in our country. For myself, Fahraaz Patel, the rest of the team in Johannesburg, Jazakallah so much for joining us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.